A man walks out of the desert. His body is burned dark by the sun. His feet are torn from years without proper shoes. He carries no sword, no armor, no banner of Spain. Behind him stretches a procession of native men, women, and children, hundreds of them. Mothers press forward with dying children in their arms. They do not follow this man because they fear him. They follow because they believe he can heal. They call him a child of the sun. But this man is not a prophet. He is not a tribal chief. He is an officer of the Spanish Empire. 8 years earlier, Álvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca sailed toward America with nearly 600 soldiers and colonists. They came carrying steel, horses, crosses, and royal authority. They believed they had been chosen to conquer a continent. Now, almost all of them were dead. The ships were gone, the horses had been eaten, the weapons had vanished. The expedition had disappeared so completely that Spain did not know whether a single man remained alive. Yet, here was Cabeza de Vaca, walking across a world no European had mapped, speaking languages no Spaniard had learned, surrounded by the very people his empire intended to subdue. For 8 years, Spain had counted these men among the dead. How had 600 confident people been reduced to 4 wandering survivors? How had an imperial officer become a healer? And what had he seen in the wilderness that would compel him to defend the people he had once come to conquer? To understand that transformation, we must return to the moment when Spain still believed nothing could stop it. In the early 16th century, the Spanish Empire appeared unstoppable. Every rumor suggested another empire waited beyond the horizon. In December 1526, Emperor Charles V granted Pánfilo de Narváez the authority to explore, conquer, and settle a vast territory called La Florida. No one knew where Florida truly ended. On Spanish maps, it was less a place than a promise, and certain that whatever waited in America would yield to Spanish steel. Among the officers selected for the expedition was Álvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca. He was appointed royal treasurer. If Narváez succeeded, Cabeza de Vaca would share in the triumph. If the expedition failed, he might be one of the men required to explain why. In June 1527, the fleet sailed from Spain. 5 vessels carried approximately 600 soldiers, colonists, craftsmen, servants, married women, and enslaved Africans. They carried horses for war, weapons for conquest, priests for saving souls. They intended to create a colony, and they had the confidence of a civilization that had begun to confuse victory with destiny. But the expedition started dying before it ever reached Florida. When the fleet stopped in Hispaniola, more than 100 men refused to continue. Whatever their reasons, nearly a quarter of the expedition vanished without a battle. Then the fleet continued to Cuba. There, he sent Cabeza de Vaca ahead with 2 ships to gather provisions. Instead, the sky turned black. A hurricane struck the coast with almost no warning. Wind tore through the harbor. Ships were lifted by the sea and hurled against one another. Horses screamed inside the broken vessels. By morning, both ships were gone. 60 men were dead. 20 horses had vanished beneath the sea. Cabeza de Vaca survived. Narváez arrived to find the expedition already shattered. The mission would not continue that year. The survivors spent the winter in Cuba, rebuilding what the hurricane had destroyed. They had not yet seen Florida. The dying had already begun. Narváez delayed the mission and spent the winter rebuilding his strength. By February 1528, the fleet was ready to try again. They sailed for Havana. They never reached it. Another storm struck. The ships were blown away from Cuba and driven into the Gulf of Mexico. Still, Narváez pushed forward. Turning back would mean returning to Spain without land, wealth, or glory. For a man who had been given a continent to conquer, failure was more frightening than the unknown.